Hi fairies, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Fifi. It's so nice to have you here. I hope you stay a while. Today we are going to be talking about the 8 books that I read in the month of January. So my total number of pages for January was 2,726 pages and my average rating was 3.38. So it was quite low, okay? I read a lot of mid and somewhat bad books this month. Not my best reading month whatsoever, and it upsets me because I wanted to start the year off strong. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But let's get into it. Let's actually talk about all these books. So the first book I read is Holy Wrath by Victoria Meyer. This is a gothic high fantasy following our main character Ophelia, who is raised up in this very intense Christian religion type faith, and she's made to believe that some other people from a different place are evil and they are the enemy. Throughout her life, she works tirelessly for her saints to grant her the power to do their workings, but that never happens, and we will come to realize why. But then she comes in contact with Niatrix, a member from this other place that they have demonized. She is forced or made by the higher ups in her own community, place, faith, to basically turn Niatrix into one of them. Okay, and in the course of doing this, she forms a relationship with Niatrix and learns so much about her religion, so much about her faith or supposed faith and the people that are leading it, and basically deconstructs these holds that they have on her. I thought that this was a very atmospheric and evocative read with very strong lyrical writing. I really did appreciate a lot of the writing, but while it is intentional and immersive and evocative, I found that it was quite repetitive in its essence. We had a lot of repetition of some various phrases, some various thought processes and literary devices, and it caused those literary devices and phrases to not be as impactful as they were supposed to be because it was repeated over and over and over again. I found our main character Ophelia quite compelling. She is a disabled woman who has put all her faith and her trust in this God and the people that are, speaking for this God. I loved how this author tackled the quiet violence and trauma that comes with honestly any type of religion, but specifically this particular religion that honestly kind of mimics the Christian faith. I love how she showed how women are constantly belittled and made to just serve and serve and serve in these religious spaces. And I love the trajectory of Ophelia going from a very devout person in this faith to questioning the faith and breaking free from those religious structural holds and forming a relationship with herself and loving herself for who she is rather than who she believes in. As far as the relationship in this book, I was not the biggest fan of it. I thought that there were some cute moments and moments that I enjoyed, but generally, I did not feel the chemistry between them. It felt like this relationship was simply a byproduct of Ophelia's rebellion against her people and her faith, and I just never felt an emotional connection between them, especially considering how insta-lusty it was from the very beginning. I also thought the plotting and the pacing of this book was a little bit messy and lacked a specific structure and did not flow as well as I would have liked it to. The ending was okay, but still like leaving much to be desired. And yeah, I thought the audiobook, because it was an audiobook e-arc that I got from NetGalley, was not my favorite thing ever because the narrator I found wasn't the best at delivering dialogue and conversation between characters. She sounded flat and monotonous a lot of the time, and that didn't help my feelings for this book. I would say generally this is a solid read if you're into like gothic high fantasy books, high fantasy that relies more on mood than actual cohesion and character depth and exploration. Like Niatrix, our main character's romantic interest didn't really have much of a backstory or depth to her, and I found that that was causing me to not connect to her and their overall relationship as much as I could have or would have. But yeah, it was a solid read. I would recommend it for what it is. It just wasn't anything necessarily special. I gave it 3.25 stars, and yeah, I can't wait actually to read more of this author's books because I do enjoy her writing style. I really do. The next book I read was The Charmed Library by Jennifer Morman. This was a very intriguing read, okay, and that's not complimentary, unfortunately. This book follows Stella, sister who loses her father. Her brother moves to a completely different state and her boyfriend basically ghosts her. She is left reading from all these unfortunate situations that have happened to her, and the only thing she has going for her at the moment is her job as a library assistant in this charmed library. The owner of this library is an old man that she sees as a father figure. The magic system of this book is that our main character can basically see people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions as physical words. We also have a thing with the charmed library where characters from the books in this library can literally come to life, and our main character forms a romantic relationship with one of the characters from one of her favorite books. So there's already a conflict of interest going on there for me because she has read this book multiple times since she was literally a child, and she knows literally everything about this person already before they even meet. So that was definitely immediately icky for me personally, and then we get another review that just leaves a very sour taste on my tongue. Generally, I did not like anything about the dynamic of this relationship that our main character forms with one of these characters. I thought it was very icky. There was no actual chemistry, for being honest. In like 1 week, they're already proclaiming their love for each other and ready to give their lives for each other. And it's like, whoa, how did we get here? It was just too much too soon, and still with other very weird elements that I did not mess with whatsoever. Okay, the writing I thought was trying to be lyrical but at the same time trying to be quirky, and it's like, stop. Like, it was giving millennial type humor, millennial type quirkiness, and I was just not into it whatsoever. The writing felt very childish and juvenile, and our main character felt very childish and juvenile as well. This is supposed to be a 30-year-old woman, and her best friend literally sound like teenagers throughout this book, and I was just like, what is going on? I also found a lot about the magic and the ending just silly and outlandish, and I just did not like this book. Okay, I think it's very evident that I did not enjoy this book. I thought it was somewhat entertaining, I guess. Like, I was eager to find out where the hell this is going, even though it was mostly predictable. So I gave it 2 stars instead of the 1 star that I would have given it otherwise. I don't think I would recommend this book. Then I read The Star Society by Gabriela Saab. This is a historical fiction that follows two sisters that reunite after World War II. So we have one sister, Ada, who is this Audrey Hepburn inspired upcoming actress, and then we have another sister, Ingrid, who is a private investigator. So they are separated for a long time during the war, and then after the war, their paths cross once again, and they go on this joint journey of justice, of survival, of secrets, of love. We just see them navigate through their lives amid the backdrop of this Red Scare in Hollywood at the time. I really enjoyed the writing of this book. It wasn't anything necessarily special, but it was very intentional and effortlessly immersive. I thought the prose was very much polished and cinematic. I loved how this author was able to use our main character's sisterly bond to explore self-identity and reinvention and survival strength in the midst of traumatic events. I loved how she used this Red Scare and Cold War paranoia backdrop to show, moral complexity between the two sisters and people around them. I would say my main qualm with this book was that aside from our main characters, the two sisters, the other characters feel like props that just aid the story rather than actual people of their own. They feel very, very underdeveloped. Another thing I didn't enjoy was the dip in the pacing when political intrigue took center stage. I felt like the politics, while you can tell that a lot of research was done and taken into account when it comes to the writing of this book, it was not very well integrated as much as it could have been. I gave this book 4 stars. I think it was generally a very thoughtful and compelling read, and I would recommend it if you're into historical fiction novels, but it didn't quite reach its potential. The next book I read, or rather finished, because I started this book literally in December, was Lily by Rose Tremaine. This is another historical fiction novel. It follows our main character, Lily, who from the beginning of this book, literally from the synopsis, we are told is a murderer. We basically get back and forth chapters between her childhood and her in present day and see the trajectory of her life, how she gets to where she is now as a murderer. Lily was basically an abandoned orphan, and when she was a baby, we have this policeman that found her and basically saved her life, takes her to this founding hospital. And after you are taken to this founding hospital as a baby, you are then released to some particular people like couples. It's like this foster care type of situation, and when you reach the age of 6, they bring you back to the family hospital and you are raised in this family hospital until you reach like 16 or 17. I loved how this author brought 19th century London to life and explored the cruelties of child institutions at the time. She was able to effectively show how hard survival was for abandoned children at the time without giving too much, without spoon feeding us information that we should, do our own personal research on. As far as the writing, while it was lyrical and beautiful in its general essence, felt a little too melodramatic. Okay, we would get these run on sentences that would just go on and on and on. And the first few times it was impactful, it was emotional, it was, interesting, intriguing, but it happened just too many times for my personal taste, and it caused me to feel a little bit emotionally distant from the story that was being told. It kind of pulled me out of the story a lot of the time and caused the writing to feel a little more tedious than it should have. Our main character, Lily, is very complex and layered and dynamic in her nature, and the fact that we know from the beginning of this book that she is a murderer adds tension that carries well throughout the book. I just thought that there wasn't necessarily an emotional connection. I wasn't able to connect to her as much as I would have liked to, and I can't even tell you why exactly that is. Aside from Lily, though, there's only one other character that we get a little bit more information about. Literally, all the characters have no development or character to them. Lily really feels like the only real person in this book. When she's released from this family hospital to go and fend for herself, basically, she comes in contact once again with this policeman that saved her life as a baby. Keep in mind that when she's a baby, he's already a policeman. And then they meet up once again when she's 17 years old, and there's a romantic situation that happens that just gives me the ick. Okay, I know it's very representative of the times, like it makes a lot of sense, but this is a married man that was already a man when she was a literal baby. So I'm just like, like I really don't like reading about things like that. I don't even like the insinuation of it, even if it doesn't necessarily go anywhere like in this book. I don't like even the thought of that. It just creeps me out, icks me out, and yeah, I didn't love that. Generally, I think this was a very solid, engaging, and intentional book. I would recommend it if you're into slower historical fictions, but it wasn't like a standout for me personally, and it wasn't anything necessarily special. So I gave it 3.75 stars. So that was the only physical book I read in January. The rest of the books I read were Net Galley arcs, which explains why I wasn't the biggest fan of most of them. But the next book I read was yet another arc, an audiobook arc, Gabby Green Knows Who Done It by Sam Shida. This is a spy rom-com that honestly doesn't take itself too seriously whatsoever. We are just following this mom who is an upcoming CIA spy agent as she goes undercover on this couples retreat with her co-worker. So there's a fake relationship situation happening there. We basically just follow her as she navigates mom life as well as her career and her relationship with other people and her romantic relationships after just getting divorced. I did not know that this book was the second in a series prior to going into it. So that definitely caused some problems for me, because for the first two chapters, I was like, what the hell is going on? How did we get here? What is happening? But then after that, it was very easy to follow, very easy to get through. It wasn't taking itself seriously, like I said, because some deeper moments that I did appreciate. We saw some insecurities that our main character has as a mom, as an older woman navigating life newly single. But generally, it was very, very silly, very, very quirky, a lot of quirky millennial humor incorporated in this book, and it was generally enjoyable. Like, for the most part, it was enjoyable. When I wasn't cringing, I was smiling. I felt the romantic relationship that she formed with her co-worker was kind of cute. I think I would have liked it a lot more if I read the first book and saw their progression into what they become in the second book. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily bad. I just found this book to be very mid, okay, like an enjoyable book if you're looking for something unserious, something very quick and easy to follow and get through, but it wasn't special by any means. I gave it 3 stars though. I would recommend it for those specific purposes, but yeah, don't go looking for something deeply intricate, because no. Then I read Once Upon a Song by Nadine Bells. This is a gothic fantasy that follows our main character Anna as she gets a job at this very mysterious hotel as a singer. So immediately we know that something is off. We know that there's something very eerie going on in this hotel. Everybody is kind of on edge, and that tension does carry well throughout the book. Not that the writing, while it was lyrical and evocative, or it was trying to be, was very much lacking in actual character. It felt like this author doesn't have a unique voice of her own. It really did feel like anybody could have written this book. It followed the very predictable routes that you would expect after reading the synopsis of this book. Nothing was especially interesting or gripping about this book, but it was done, well enough that I generally enjoyed it for what it was. I really liked the setting of this book, this hotel. It was very dreamlike, lush, eerie, weird, but still very intriguing. The hotel almost felt like a character of its own, and I appreciated that. I didn't appreciate how underdeveloped most of the characters were. Even our main character, Anna, is this like quiet recluse who has had a lot go on in her life from childhood, but we don't get anything actually emotionally hard hitting or with enough depth or as much depth as I would have personally liked. The main character forms a romantic relationship with the manager of this hotel who is very tropey. Okay, what you would expect from somebody like him, but he's also very shady. Initially, it was very subtle and restrained, and then we just get a complete 180 into something so incredibly intense. And it's like, how did we get here? I think overall, this book had some very interesting aspects of it, and I enjoyed the ending for what it was, I guess. I think there are a lot of people that would appreciate the gothic influences in this book, but it wasn't a standout for me personally. I gave it 3.25 stars. It was enjoyable for what it was, but it wasn't anything I would, write home about. Then I read an actual high epic fantasy book, Felon the Cycle, the first book in the God Tokens series by Emily Bellman. This was a very interesting read, okay, very conflicting as well, because I liked it, I enjoyed it for the most part, but I also had a number of qualms. I think this book takes a very typical route initially with a main character, Daniel. He grows up in the mountains and forms a romantic relationship with Erin, who is another very prominent character in this book, but it turns out that he is the lost prince of this kingdom and he has to come back and save the kingdom. So it's very typical in that sense, but I think the telling of the story was somewhat unique. The writing wasn't necessarily special, it wasn't giving you anything that you haven't seen before. It was very easy to get through, I would say, for the most part. But yeah, I just kept feeling like something was missing from the writing. Our main character is initially in a relationship with Erin, like I've said, who is a healer in the mountains with him. But then we have Raydon, who comes from basically nowhere and upends his life, telling him about who he really is and asking him to come back and save their kingdom. So three of them go on this journey and a lot happens. A lot happens. We get a queer romance. That's all I'm going to say. I didn't love the romance as much as I would have liked to. I felt like the pacing really impacted my feelings for the romance. I felt like we were rushing past more emotional and intentional scenes that would have added more of a connection to the romantic relationship and the story in general. And then we were lingering on scenes that did not feel as important. And it just was a very weird structural process for me personally. I also found the ending to be a little bit underwhelming, and generally something was just not giving me what I would have liked this book to give. I can't even say what exactly that is. It was still a very good book, a solid read. I gave it 4 stars and I would highly recommend it. But I don't think it's necessarily reinventing the wheel. I don't think it's doing anything necessarily special or not seen before. I would recommend it though, and I'm excited for the second book. I'm excited to follow the series and this author's work. Finally, in the month of January, I read Soft Launch by Sarah Vaciano. This is a coming of adulthood novel. We follow our main character Sam, who fresh off a divorce from a rushed and early marriage is in her 30s trying to navigate life and relationships and her career. For the first 60% of this book, I thought that this was going to be a very highly rated book, and I was very much pleasantly surprised because I did not expect it book titled Soft Launch to be like an astounding read for me personally. But then for some reason, around the 70-80% mark, things just went a little bit downhill. It just started to feel rushed and not like what I was reading in the first place at all. The writing was nothing special. Okay, it was very straightforward, very to the point, very easy to read, easy to follow, and I did enjoy that. I was enjoying the book for the most part, and I was enjoying the relationship that we get in this book. We see our main character go through so many situations, but there's a particular relationship that stands out that I loved from literally the beginning, because we saw them literally build a friendship before the actual relationship. But for some reason, our main character just started to get so incredibly annoying, and then things just like go to a place that I did not expect it to go, and it ended up leaving me wanting more. It just left me wanting so much more, and I was very much upset by that, because I thought this was going to be, like I said, a very highly rated book. I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars. This is this author's first ever book though, so it was a surprisingly enjoyable and charming debut, especially for a book such as this. So I can't wait to follow this author's career and read more of her works in the future, because I think she has great potential. But yeah, those are all the books that I read in the month of January. It was, like I said, not the best reading month, not the worst, but like not great. I really hope that February gives me a little bit more. I am praying to God for a 5 star or two. Like, why not? Why not? Let me know though if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, what your January looked like, what your February might look like, what's on your February TBR. Just talk to me down below. I love reading and replying comments. It's one of my favorite pastimes. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also follow me on Instagram if you want to be book besties or just besties in general. I would really love and appreciate that. For now though, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!